People from small towns expect certain things to be a certain way. They know their local police force, their paper boy, their mail carrier. Houses belong in families for generations, and businesses pass from father to son, down the line, sometimes for hundreds of years. These pastoral towns are waning in America. In the 21st century, there almost doesn't seem to be a place for them anymore. But a few still exist. This is Warren, a small former whaling community in Rhode Island, along the East Bay. Everyone knows one another, and they generally trust their neighbors. Some people don't even lock their doors. It's a simple, quiet place that doesn't see much trouble as a general rule. I guess it's a deterrent when you might know the arresting officer. But on a cold March morning in 1997, something incredibly strange happened. Someone broke the rules.
I was at work at Patriot Wine and Spirit, and I do office work, and I went out to go get a coffee next door at the Cumberland Farms, and I went next door, and when I came back, I was standing up front with the cashier checking on her, drinking my coffee, and a man came in, and he was holding something, and then he came up to us at the register, and he actually held it against me, and I thought it was a shotgun.
The man was Robert Isom, a man from Riverside who had apparently fallen into a deep depression and no longer wanted to live. He didn't want any money from the register, just to cause trouble. He harassed the two women in the store, Beth and the cashier, Erin, who was pregnant at the time.
So then about 15 minutes later or so, the phone rang, and it was the police, and they were asking me if I was being held up, and I said, yes, I do carry Sam Adams. And they said, just, like, does he have a weapon? And I said, yeah, we have that kind. So then he just stood at the counter, and what I thought was a rifle ended up being an axe, but it was like a machete axe. So it was a big silver axe. And he just kept on mumbling. He didn't seem like right in the head to begin with. And the other girl with me was crying, and she was getting hysterical at that point. So I asked him to let her leave, and finally he said she could leave. So she got out of the store, and I stood there still with him, and he just kept on mumbling and talking about things. And then finally at one point, when he wasn't looking at me, I made a run for it, and I got out. And that's when the police were coming in.
The responding officers took over 45 minutes to arrive at the store, leaving Erin and Beth to keep themselves out of harm's way. Once inside, the police confronted Isom, repeatedly telling him to drop his weapon. When he didn't comply, they made the decision to spray him with pepper spray so they could disarm him and get him safely out of the store. But Isom was a trained military vet and former firefighter, and he didn't flinch until he raised the axe to strike an officer.
And then you heard the gunshots, and everything happened. He was dead at that point.
So few things happened of this nature in Warren, in a sleepy little town, that when things like that happened, the news spread very, very quickly. A lot of folks, because we have a volunteer department, they lived by their scanners at the time. We even had a scanner in our house because one of my brothers was a volunteer firefighter, and so the police calls go out. And quite frankly, the town is so small, when the sirens blow, you could hear them all over. So everybody knew something was going on in town, whether it was something really minor, like a rescue call, or something really major. And the more police sirens you heard, the more serious the event.
Once the news of the event had died down, the Isom family sued the town of Warren for the wrongful death of their son. Their claim was dismissed. Years later, Beth and her daughter no longer live in Warren. My own family has moved on as well, into a rather interesting house.
Went through the closing and everything was good, and began to receive email from the previous owners who happened to be the family of origin for the person who we found out had committed the crime at the time. Simply a coincidence, a little bit of a creepy coincidence, that his family of origin lived in what is my house now.
This house.
This house. Would never dream of something of this nature happening in the town. In all the years that I lived there, my family lived there, there have been very, very, very few events that were of such a violent nature.
To this day, crime in Warren is nearly unheard of, at least on this scale. Just over 10,000 people live here, passing on their customs and their traditions. They lead their lives beside their neighbors, taking a risk every day when they leave without locking their front door. But I know exactly what they'll say in their defense. Bad things never happen in Warren.